Hi, folks. Denise Howell here. And next up on This Week in Law, Sarah Pearson, my co-host, is here. Kathy Gellis and Michael Lissack join us. We're going to talk about some apps that are taking a very interesting approach to social problems and whether bullying and sexual assault might be in the crosshairs because of them. We're going to talk about a new Computer Fraud and Abuse Act case out of the Ninth Circuit and Ashley Madison misusing the DMCA, all next on This Week in Law.
Netcasts you love.
Really a couple of excellent guests joining us today. Michael Lissack is somebody who we've talked about on the show before because back in July, we first discussed his We Consent app that he developed. And at that point, when we thought it was so interesting that we talked about it on the show, I decided, hey, we should really reach out to him and try and get him on. So I'm so glad that we were able to do that. Michael, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
In addition to being a very interesting and innovative app developer, and we're going to talk in a few moments about various apps that Michael has put out that attempt to address social issues with technology, social problems. So we're going to get into the details of those momentarily as soon as I introduce our other guest and give you some background on both of them. Michael is the executive director of the Institute for the Study of Coherence and Emergence. He's president of the American Society for Cybernetics, ISCE professor of meaning in organizations, a visiting fellow at Hull University Business School, and an affiliate member of the Center for Philosophy and History of Science at Boston University. So really quite a mouthful there and a very interesting background you've got, Michael. First of all, Michael, my hat's off to you. I think it's so creative, and you've come under a lot of fire for this, but I think it's so creative to try and address social problems in a way that is current for people, a way that involves tools that they have on them all the time, like their phone, and maybe just tries, as you've said in various interviews about your app, to change the conversation at minimum that people might, whether one of your apps can help with bullying. So this one is not aimed at the college or young adult set, but at a younger crowd involving children. I think that may be the first time we've used our kids' bumper since it was created by our intern, Sando. That's his little daughter in the picture there. That her name is Daenerys, and she's a cutie pie. Okay, so hopefully Daenerys will never find herself subject to anyone at school who's anything but wonderful and nice and polite to her. Unfortunately, that's not the lot of every child out there. And you've sort of taken your no app technology, Michael, and redesigned it, repackaged it a bit to address the bullying problem. Can you tell us how that would play out?
Well, okay, I think we need to give the people that are watching some statistics because they're fairly shocking.
Okay.
So you've got to understand that 25 to 33% of all kids that go through K-12 will report that they have felt bullied at one time or another. Over 70% of them will then go on and report that there were bystanders who stood by and did nothing. Mm-hmm. And almost all of the activity that's gone on in the anti-bullying front to date, before this app came along, was either about educating kids in the school about why bullying is bad, or was trying to educate and give tools to bystanders to stand up and do things. And then we get to the most troubling statistic of all, which is the people that have felt bullied report that 85% of the time the school district did nothing. The bystanders are being encouraged to report things to the schools, but the vast majority of the time, the people who perceive themselves to be victims do not feel the school has done anything to protect them. In light of all of that, we said an app that gives the victim a sense of empowerment and gives the victim's parents a sense of empowerment can be very changing to the context. So the no app is a version, again, of the other app that says no. But the difference this time is when your kid hits the no app, the parents are instantly notified, both email and SMS, of the geolocation of the phone. Now, I'll point out that means for something other than just bullies. If there's been a perp, if there's been a stranger, if your kid has been led astray, and then the kid hits the button, the parents now have some way of knowing where the kid's phone at least is. If the phone is not where the kid is, by the time the parent gets there, that's different. But at least they were told where the phone was when the button got hit. The other thing that the app does is it allows the victim to record, again, the person bothering them watching a no message. First time that you do it to a bully, the bully may react with shock, the bully may ignore it, the bully may do something to the phone. Mm-hmm. If the bully does something to the phone, every police department that we've talked to has said, you just crossed a magic line. And the magic line is the police are very good at dealing with property crime. Mm-hmm. They're not that good at dealing with psychological crime. They're not very good at dealing with the word of one kid against another. But the minute the bully does something to that telephone, that's a property crime. And it's a property crime where the phone is creating its own evidence. It's getting uplifted to the cloud. The police are very good at dealing with that one. And once that happens, the entire dialogue changes because suddenly the bully is no longer the one with the leverage. Now the kid whose phone was taken or broken, the parents of the kid whose phone was taken or broken, and the police have a lot more to say about what's going to happen than the bully does.
All right. So this is just launched this month, I believe, just in the last week
Correct.
or so?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. I think it adds something to your other no app. It adds the panic button function that you were discussing. Can that be tweaked so that it's if it's more appropriate to have the principal or a teacher notified, can they be set as the contact person?
Right now we have it set with 2 emails and 2 SMSs, and the parent is free to put whatever they want there. Mm-hmm. We have told the schools and the school departments that we're talking to that if they want to deploy it on a school-wide or a school district-wide basis, that we're happy to add a 5th field so that some contact address or number at the school is notified as well. That's easily added if somebody wants it.
Right. Like your other apps, I think this is a great way to grind things to a halt and get a conversation going that might not otherwise happen. I would imagine that we might see a lot of smashed phones, and as you said, that could lead to more effective or direct means of punishments. But
not even the punishment, Denise.
Yeah,
it's also the dialogue again.
Yeah.
Most of the time when the schools are not getting involved, it's because they don't want to get involved in something that's a he said, he should, said, she said. Mm-hmm. The phone app creates evidence. The smashed phone, if there is one, is evidence. The fact is that while the phone's getting smashed, it's recording who's smashing it. So that's further evidence. Mm-hmm. Once there's a record, the school departments are much better at actually doing something when they have real evidence. This is the one time where the discussion we had before about the nature of evidence actually does make a big difference in this case, because the people that the parents think are going to be the first line of defense have not been acting in very many cases. And the reason that they've not been acting is that the school departments are afraid to do so in the absence of evidence. So by giving them evidence, we are also empowering the school department to do what it might otherwise want to do, which is intervene.
Right. And just psychologically, I think once, the playing of that no message to someone who's bullying you, the first time it happens, it's bound to just completely take them by surprise and maybe make them do a double take and go, whoa, if this I've been going forward on the premise that this was all happening clandestinely and no one would ever know that we've been bullying this poor child. And now there's some accountability brought into it that wasn't otherwise there. And that could be effective. Sarah, what do you think of this one?
I mean, I hate to say I'm skeptical again. I guess I'm having a hard time seeing how it would be harmful though, unlike the other one. So, but
let me jump in and supply that one for you, because I, of course, ran this by my 11-year-old, and his thought was, first of all, it needs to have a panic button, which it does have, but he wished that you didn't have to launch the app to get to the panic button. If there were some way that you could just sort of touch the power button on your phone, or, I know that's harder to pull off from an app development standpoint, but he felt like launching the app was a step too far if you're actually in some dire situation where you're about to get pounded, to actually get your phone out and launch an app might be difficult. But his other comment was, well, I could see how this could be turned on someone and used to frame someone as a bully. And I asked him to try and play that out. And he said, well, just, again, since you launched the app and someone's notified that there's a situation going on, that immediately casts suspicion on what's happening. And maybe this is being used aggressively. Now, I know that's not a good reason to say it's not a good app and not serving a good purpose, but certainly people have, and kids in particular too, will show their ability to use technology in creative ways. And that's one thing that could happen, don't you think, Michael?
Well, now I'm going to put the burden back on his parent. Mm-hmm. You're getting a notification. In theory, the way we've seen this play out so far, it works as follows. You have a discussion with your child when you put the app on his or her phone the first time. A kid is a kid. Sometime in the next 48 hours, that app is going to get run whether anyone is bothering him or her or not. Mm-hmm. And guess what? You're notified. This gives you the opportunity for yet another discussion. Now, sometime in the next 3 or 4 days or a week, he's going to do it again. Probably to a friend or a sibling. And this gives yet another opportunity for a discussion. Now, my understanding of pedagogy as a teacher is 3 times tends to be a magic number. So at least you've had 3 preliminary discussions with your child about the importance of this app's use. If your child starts using the app aggressively to say everyone is bullying him or her, you need having a very different kind of discussions with your child. Mm-hmm. Remember, you're going to be the one who gets notified. It's unlikely, if there's a whole series of these, that some third party is going to say, gee, these videos have great evidentiary value, other than to say your child might need some help. There's a big difference between 1 or 2 directed at a particular bully or a perp or a stranger, and an entire series directed at all kinds of people because your child feels that this has somehow empowered him or her to accuse people of being bullies.
Right. Hey, Kathy, I'm curious what you think about this app in particular and about technology and bullying on the larger sense. On the one hand, it can facilitate bullying in various ways. The app we're talking about here is about physical confrontations person to person, but technology certainly has whole other facets by which people can get bullied. But it also has other facets, app or no app, by which situations which would otherwise have been carried out behind closed doors or not monitored or not made public can be captured. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that whole dynamic.
My initial reaction is one that's a little more sociological, which is, have we defined, bullying is a very broad term. Are we even in the realm where we're talking about physical bullying, or are we talking about other forms of bullying? There's a lot of psychological bullying that goes on among kids, which I don't have data, but maybe Michael does. I'm wondering if that's the bigger portion of the bullying data, or is the bullying data that he's citing relating to physical bullying?
Most of it is psychological. Most of it is psychological.
So that being the case, I feel like there still might be a definitional problem. As far as the physical bullying, I would have the concern that wielding the phone as a defense, not only is the phone going to get smashed, but the kid is likely to get smashed. So this may not be a good idea of something to arm your kid with, because it might have unfortunate physical results in the attempt of providing a defense. But if we're talking about psychological bullying, I think we've got a very complex issue that schools are not necessarily dealing well with. I think mostly because as a society, we're not entirely sure how we want to deal with it. I think there's something overall that's good about the recognition of a lot of psychological pressure on kids that used to happen without anybody stopping. It was just kids are being kids, and nobody ever really looked twice at it. And there's something to be said for we've evolved as a society, and we can recognize that, no, this actually can have a really harmful and lasting effect on kids potentially. And maybe this is something we should try to discourage as part of how we raise kids to be decent adults. But I sometimes wonder if if we have too much of a knee-jerk overreaction to some of it, and we lose a lot of nuance, and sometimes schools are not good at the nuance, and sometimes the expectation of school fix it, that might not necessarily be an appropriate role for the school to take, or if it did try to fix it, it would come at the expense of some other important things. I mean, we do see, and this is similar to the issue I raised before, of schools increasingly overstepping their governing school hours to now trying to govern student behavior beyond the schoolyard, things that they do off campus, things that they do off campus with social media. Now the schools want to police. And I think we may have asked for this in a way, and I think it's something we should give back, because I think there's some significant harm to education and the autonomy of students, even students who are minors, in their ability to express themselves and grow up. And so again, I think my skepticism is this a problem that we understand well enough where just add technology is going to be an effective solution, or it might even exacerbate some of the general problems we're seeing about how we deal with bullying in general?
Well, I don't know that Michael would say that this is the solution to the problem, right? It's a way of addressing it.
Again, it's a tool. And I'm hearing Kathy express general skepticism about employing technology in the absence of well-said things, but that's not the world we live in. We try things. They work, they don't work. We learn from how people interact with them. And to argue that we have to wait for lots of data to see what happens, it doesn't work in the drug world. I don't know why it would work in this part of the world either. Technology moves very quickly. These are big societal issues. To suggest that we should not be attempting tools that can make a major difference because we haven't fully studied them, I think is just quite foolish.
I'm actually sort of intrigued by the idea about the experiment of adding technology to certain problems. I think my concern is that the problem itself is poorly defined, and this isn't really addressed to the app itself. This is addressed more to some frustrations about how we as a society are trying to deal with bullying as a social problem among children, and my frustrations are more there. I think those problems are significant enough that that's why I sort of don't tend to think that the technology is going to be tailored enough to effectively solve them. But I am somewhat intrigued about if you add technology, which we're doing anyway by default because technology is becoming more ubiquitous in our lives, what is the effect? But then we also sort of run into the problems of kids as guinea pigs, and what if, them doing this does change child behavior in a way that maybe is a bad thing, or in an individual instance, what if it causes the bully to actually kick the crap out of them? So there are some concerns that way. But actually, from that standpoint, I'm sort of, what is the role that technology have? And I think it can be exciting to find out. But I don't think that's necessarily the problem that I'm getting stuck on or that society is getting stuck on. I think it's something bigger.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Kathy. I certainly like the notion of, you put it out there. If it helps some kids, that's a good thing. If it winds up having consequences that people didn't foresee, then you course correct and try and cope with that. In IRC, there have been a couple of comments that as soon as the app is first used, the bullies get smarter, right? They know you take away the person's phone, or you put their hands behind their back, or whatever. You make it so that it's just not a factor anymore. And maybe that is a problem, but it doesn't mean that it's not, that it might not help in certain circumstances. Any thoughts along those lines, Michael?
Well, I will point out that, again, most of the statistics actually indicate that most bullies are themselves suffering from insecurity complexes that they're overcompensating for. And the comments that you're seeing in the IRC may be right, but it may also be that some vast number of the bullies are instead going to react with fear.
Well, one could only hope. Sarah, any final thoughts on this?
No, I mean, I think I agree with Kathy that I think you're onto something, Kathy, about this kind of, are we over defining the problem or so broadly defining it? You hear so much about bullying now, and I guess one of the things that's been on my reading list for a long time, and I haven't gotten to it yet, is Emily Bazelon's book about bullying. But I've heard her speak about it, and I think that one of her arguments there is that by defining bullying so broadly, we're almost trivializing it in a way that is actually counterproductive for the really serious cases of bullying which are going on. And so I guess my reaction, I'm also I guess I'm biased because I'm currently reading the book Free Range Kids, and it's about how paranoid we are now about our kids getting kidnapped, or all of these different things. And so my kind of gut reaction to this was it's another thing to be fearful of. It's another panic button where it feels to me like we're just a society that just is waiting for another thing to worry about. But on the other hand, I guess, unlike with the consent app, I don't feel like it could be harmful. So it's, to me, it's a fine experiment. And if it helps people, then obviously that's a good thing. I don't really see a downside, I guess. It's just not something that I would probably choose for my child, but.
We're getting some inquiries from our audience, Michael, about where the No app is available and the other apps we've discussed today.
Okay, so the No app is available. The easiest way, because Apple has made things difficult, is to just go to the-no-app.com and click on the link, which will bring you to the right place in the App Store. For whatever reason, if you search for it by name in the App Store, you have to leave out the hyphens or it does not come up. Thank you, Apple. If you are a group or a school district, you send me an email either from the website or directly, and we can do the group things for you. And then for the We Consent suite of apps, you must go through protect=respect.com because Apple banned them from the App Store. So the only way that you can get them is by getting them directly from us. But it's not a problem. It's just one extra click. When you join ICE, which is the Institute for the Study of Coherence and Emergence, as a student member, you get the apps. You get it's your own store that has the apps in them. It's one extra step, but it's all of about an extra 60 or 75 seconds.
All right. Thanks for that. We're getting lots of people in IRC are very interested in the bullying issue, are giving us all kinds of good comments and insights. One is, of course, bullying is not limited to the school environment. Yes, of course, it's not. Can happen anywhere, and with all our kids and so many after school and extracurricular activities, it could really honestly happen during any aspect of their life. So as much trouble as we might have defining what is bullying and what's not, certainly kids know when they feel intimidated and hurt. So as parents, it's something that's much on our minds, and always interested in creative solutions to the problem.